They say I live in the past.
Good evening, everyone, to another edition of They Say I Live in the Past, where a musical guest joins me. They choose 8 pieces of music and we talk. Basically, that's how it works. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Seattle-born Gordon Raphael tonight for this show. Gordon started out as a musician, playing keyboards in bands during the height of grunge in the 90s, before making the move into music production. Since then, he's worked with artists of many genres, including high-profile, critically acclaimed records like Regina Spektor's Soviet Kitsch, and of course, The Strokes' Is This It? And that latter album went on to sell millions and has been in albums of the decade and charts and so on. And lots of people have been hugely influenced by the sound of that album as well as by the album itself. He was also a member of Sky Cries Mary. An experience, Gordon has said, was his big breakthrough because, as he said, they made records that actually got released and played and toured. People talk a lot about Gordon being an artist-led producer as well. So hopefully during this chat, we'll get to talk about his musical selections and maybe get an insight into some of that as well. Good evening, Gordon.
Good evening to you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Not at all. It's a pleasure. And what's very special about this evening as well is you've done some little pre-records as well because you've really thought about these choices this evening. Is it difficult for you, someone who's steeped in music, to narrow it down to 8 tracks?
No, there's a rotating cast of 8 tracks. If you asked me next week what those 8 songs would be, it would be different. But I love talking about the music that I like, the music that is in my heart, that influenced me. So any chance I can to talk about it and play it for people, I do.
Excellent. And growing up in Bellevue, you started piano lessons at the age of 8. Is that correct?
That is correct. Didn't like it at all, sorry to say.
Right. And what was it about the experience? Because obviously music is such a big part of your life. What was it about the piano lessons?
Well, my first piano teacher was trying to teach me like children's pieces like Row, Row, Row Your Boat, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and it just didn't speak to me. And then I got in the car and I heard the Beatles and Cream, and I thought, this is really music. I want to do this. And so I joined a rock and roll band when I was about 13 years old, and I figured out how to play piano that way. And so that stuck with me. That's I took that a long way.
And so at that point, had you learnt the basics in terms of reading music and so on, or was it more kind of improvisation and so on?
I actually took lessons in improvisation. I had this super long-haired teacher who ate sunflower seeds. He ate sunflower seeds and drank cranberry juice and taught me how to make stuff up. And that was invaluable. And I used that stuff every day. Later, when I was in high school, about age 17, I started taking serious classical piano lessons and learning how to read music. And I really liked that. Like by that time, I was ready to like learn Bach and Chopin and really cool composers like that.
Right. Okay. So it's an interesting way of doing it. I mean, I know for lots of young people when they start an instrument, sometimes it is the basics that they have to really work hard to stick with it. And then once they've got that, other things come later. But for you, it was the other way around. You wanted to play the music you could hear first.
Right. I wanted to be completely free with nobody telling me what to do. And that's something, of course, I later applied to recording. Like I just wanted to do it my own way. I wanted to make distortion. I wanted to make really crazy sounds. I didn't want to sound like a classic producer.
Got you. And we'll hopefully delve into a bit of that later as well. What music were you listening to then? Was it just music on the radio you were hearing, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was 10 years old and turned on the radio and they said, here's the White Album by the Beatles. And they played both sides of it, from beginning to end in FM stereo fidelity. And so those kind of opportunities and experiences were still available to me at that age. Yeah, radio was a big source of my music.
Fantastic. Right, the first selection you've got tonight, you've taken it from the band Yes, Siberian Catru. Why is this in your 8 tonight?
It's a very aggressive introduction to my musical taste. Yes was a hugely influential band on me because they had this long-haired blonde keyboard player named Rick Wakeman who had this circle of pianos and synthesizers around him. And when I saw that, I said, that's what I want my office to look like. And so I basically aimed to be where he was. And this is a phenomenal piece of music. It is over the top.
And it's a brilliant way to start the show tonight. So we're going to take your spoken introduction and then we're going to go straight into the track. Here we go.
Close to the edge,
as beautiful a record as ever existed in this world, up there with Led Zeppelin 4 and Physical Graffiti. The morning dawns, we open the window and fly outside, higher and further than we ever knew. Sun Tower asking, Moongate climber? Hey, that's me, always and forever. Christian changer? Used as a positive for the first time in rock and roll, just like the splendid paintings in the National Gallery. The first and best harpsichord solo in rock, followed by pedal steel bliss and heaven. Shout out these lords' names: Bill, Steve, Chris, John, and Rick. Thank you.
When you listen to a track like that now in 2021, do you listen to it differently than when you were being inspired by music like this back in the early 70s, early to mid 70s?
No, I don't think I listen to it differently. I think I don't know. I hear all the details. I'm experiencing it just like the first time I heard it, even though it's the thousandth time I've heard it, and I kind of know what's going to come next. It always surprises me, and so that time when I listened to it, I just noticed how incredibly gigantic and mountainous Chris Squire's bass was all the way through that song. He's more rhythmic and powerful than the drums even. The drums are like these light flighty accents, but the bass line is holding it down so deeply. And then I forgot there was a sitar guitar in there. Like Steve Howe used to have this sitar guitar mounted on a mic stand so he could just walk up to it while holding his electric guitar and reach around it and play the sitar stuff. And I heard it there, and oh, it's so good. I went on a trance listening to that song just now.
So Rick Wakeman, he was the person you were looking at that point, surrounded by his keyboards. And even at that stage, were you thinking about the different types of keyboards and synthesizers that were available? Was that something you were aiming to get as part of your collection?
Yeah, he had those mellotrons that sounded like orchestras with tapes inside of them, and he had this grand piano and a big Hammond organ and these mini Moog synthesizers, and he wore a green glittery cape as well. So he looked like an ambassador from another dimension completely at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. The cape was very, very important to that as well. And you have said, I think previously, that it was probably around 76, maybe 77, that you felt some of the progressive bands had lost their magic at that point.
Oh yes, oh yes. Like this, when Close to the Edge came out, this album we just heard, that was still the potent peak. You know, there was still a couple good years left. And then all of a sudden, at the same time, all the bands I liked from that genre kind of, I don't know, they lost the plot or they gave up. I don't know what. I think it was because touring was so damn difficult in those days, you know? And by the time 75, 76 rolls around, all of those bands, I watched them on stage and they just looked tired, like they'd been through the ringer. And of course, then the Sex Pistols came out and they couldn't work anymore.
I don't know, looking back in it, or at the time, you said that kind of taught you a lesson that about you never wanted to make music that sucked, or music that you didn't believe in. And that's obviously how you've kind of progressed since then as well yourself.
I keep my ear open to new sounds, and luckily every generation has very creative people that are mind-blowing on their instrument and making cutting edge, innovative new sounds. And so I'm glad that listening to records from 1971 isn't the only thing that I can dig, you know?
An Italian band next, Italian rock group. You definitely pronounce it much better than I will. Premiata Forneria Marconi.
Yes. The name means, dig this, the award-winning bakery Marconi.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and on their first album, they are all in army jackets with long hair and beards, carrying loaves of French bread under their arm. Isn't that sexy? Oh my God!
And that is one of the first albums by an Italian rock group, I think, to get into the American charts, to appear in the American charts around 1973.
I actually met one of my heroes from that Italian band, and he told me that there was never really a rock scene in Italy, and in fact, Italy was never on the same page as any of the other European countries or America when it came to popular music. But in progressive rock, that one genre, suddenly there were a number of Italian bands, and the British and the Europeans respected them. And it was like this first time where they kind of joined the party.
And really accomplished musicians in that band as well, because they had played, I think, some of them for almost as session musicians, or played for other people as well. Yeah.
Yes, unbelievable.
We'll take your spoken introduction and then we'll go into Photos of Ghosts.
Photos of Ghosts, Premiata Forneria Marconi. Say it loud. How hard is it to find Italian space rock? Here it is. What a name. Photos of Ghosts. Violin, accordion, synthesizers, manic overboard drumming, and lead guitar as great as any from US or UK. The guy finds an old dusty book with faded pictures inside of people who no longer walk on the earth, of the days we ran and the days we sang. Such a blessed, peaceful, contemplative masterpiece. English lyrics by Pete Sinfield, British poet, from In the Court of the Crimson King.
With silver by hand, 10,000,000 stars and the whispered melodies of pictures of love. Across its cover is written, here in our photos of ghosts, of ghosts, of ghosts, of the days we run, the days we saw.
Another really interesting orchestration on that track as well. Is that something you were particularly interested when you were in Seattle's most popular band, the Sorcerer's Apprentice? What kind of music were you doing then?
We actually were doing covers of a lot of this progressive rock stuff. In those days, to work, you had to play like 4-hour shows, and you were allowed to play one original song per hour. So we played stuff like the Bee Gees, the Beatles, Yes, PFM, and stuff like that. So that's where I kind of learned how to play my synthesizers in a live setting.
And you mentioned that you think you were developing a kind of a spoiled rock star ego by the age of 18. How did that come across to the people around you?
I mean, like, what was it? All my friends went to college, and I was 18 in the number one band in our town. And so everywhere we went, like, people were falling all over us, and I'd play a show and get like baskets full of chocolate and nail polishes and be invited to parties. And I just thought I was like kind of the king at age 18. And I had a pretty high ego and a high estimation of myself. And it didn't go over well, let me tell you. I got a lot of blowback. And of course, I tumbled off my throne a couple years later and had to kind of climb my way back up and kind of, humble myself a little bit.
And has that helped you over the years, Gordon? Kind of, you will have come across other musicians, rock stars, whatever, where ego is more important than anything else, maybe, or the ego is taken over. Do you deal with those people in a certain way, knowing that you've been there yourself?
Not really. Not too many egomaniac musicians want to talk to me. I mean, I'm not number one. I'm not working with Britney Spears or anything like that. But on the other hand, when I work with young musicians who I've never met, like when I first started working with the Strokes, I'm a little more older than they are, and I had more experience in the studio, but I wasn't going to treat them like I was a prima donna. I wanted to know what they wanted to do, and I wanted to give them respect right from the beginning, because I already been through my super ego phase.
When you got the Strokes to come in and you were hustling, as you say, and you got the Strokes and they came in to do the EP, obviously you had created an atmosphere in that studio. And was it a basement studio you had at that point?
Right. Well, the Strokes famously brought in their guru, J.P. Bowersock. He was this big man, he still is, with a big voice, and they trusted him. And so he was kind of like their security to make sure that everything was going to go smoothly. And of course, I wanted them to be very relaxed, and I wanted them to play well. And as a musician myself, I know you can't play well if you're uptight. If you're worried about something, you can't possibly play like Superman.
Were you recording then the band playing together? Is that one of the things that you kind of got really good at in terms of how to capture that kind of sound, that live sound almost?
Yeah. They said they wanted to do a recording technique that wasn't popular at that time. And I said, well, what's not popular is people playing their songs in a studio. And so go out and play your songs. And that was like a real novel thing. And everybody who heard the record thought, whoa, this is crazy. What am I hearing?
Okay. And this next song then, you've chosen the Stranger Song. This is number 3 in your 8 this evening. Do you want to tell me why you've chosen this one?
I chose this one simply because when I didn't hear this song for a long time. Like, it's only recently that I came across this song. And the lyrics themselves, the words, blew my mind. And I thought, this is some of the highest poetry I know of in any music. So let's go for it.
The Stranger Song by Leonard Cohen. Okay, you can go deep into your mind and just dance to the words. Connect with all history of human relationships. I guess we all either know or are this kind of stranger. Is there really a highway curling up like smoke above his shoulder? Crumple up those old train schedules and just ignore those dreams that are only one heavy burden.
It's true that all the men you knew were dealers who said they were through with dealing every time you gave them shelter. I know that kind of man. It's hard to hold the hand of anyone who's reaching for the sky just to surrender. who is reaching for the sky just to surrender. And then sweeping up the jokers that he left behind, you find he did not leave you very much, not even laughter. Like any dealer, he was watching for the card that is so high and wild, he'll never need to deal another. He was just some Joseph looking for a manger. He was just some Joseph looking for a manger. And then leaning on your windowsill, he'll say one day you caused his will to weaken with your love and warmth and shelter. And then taking from his wallet an old schedule of trains, he'll say, I told you when I came I was a stranger. But now another stranger seems to want you to ignore his dreams as though they were the burden of some other. Oh, you've seen that man before, his golden arm dispatching cards, but now it's rusted from the elbow to the finger. And he wants to trade the game he plays for shelter. Yes, he wants to trade the game he knows for shelter. Oh, you hate to watch another tired man lay down his hand like he was giving up the holy game of poker. And while he talks his dreams to sleep, you notice there's a highway that is curling up like smoke above his shoulder. It's curling just like smoke above his shoulder. You tell him to come in, sit down, but something makes you turn around. The door is open, you can't close your shelter. You try the handle of the road, it opens. Do not be afraid, it's you, my love, you who are the stranger. It is you, my love, you who are the stranger. Well, I've been waiting, I was sure we'd meet between the trains we're waiting for. I think it's time to board another. Please understand, I never had a secret chart to get me to the heart of this or any other matter. Well, he talks like this, you don't know what he's after. When he speaks like this, you don't know what he's after. Let's meet tomorrow if you choose upon the shore, beneath the bridge that they are building on some endless river. Then he leaves the platform for the sleeping car that's warm. You realize he's only advertising one more shelter. And it comes to you, he never was a stranger. And you say, okay, the bridge or someplace later. And then sweeping up the jokers that he left behind, you find he did not leave you very much, not even laughter. Like any dealer, he was watching for the card that is so high and wild, he'll never need to deal another. He was just some Joseph looking for a manger. He was just some Joseph looking for a manger. And leaning on your windowsill, he'll say one day you caused his will to weaken with your love and warmth and shelter. And then taking from his wallet an old schedule of trains, he'll say, I told you when I came I was a stranger. I told you when I came I was a stranger. I told you when I came I was a stranger.
That is Leonard Cohen, The Stranger Song. And yes, the poetry in that is something else. Just so powerful for a debut album too. So around the age of 19 or so, I read that you were an unemployed person who wrote songs all day and made strange noises on your synthesizer. Is this how you remember it? Because you were quite prolific as well. Nearly, 1,000 songs you'd put together.
Yeah, I just all I wanted to do once I found a way to write music, it took me a long time to find the first song. I tried for like 4 years to write music, and I'd always rip it up and start again, and nothing would last overnight. And then one day, at the age of 19, I actually figured out how to write my first song. And then from then on, all I wanted to do was see if I could do it again and again and again. And so I just did that. And because I didn't have any money, I didn't have any of my own equipment, I would go to friends who had little recording setups in their garage, and I would use their equipment while they were at work and then sleep on their couch until they got tired of me. And this is kind of how I planned to surprise the world with all my music one day. That was my big idea.
And what was the breakthrough for you in terms of writing songs, or finding the way for you to write songs? Because obviously, once you've stumbled across that secret, you've got this urge to just keep going in case you lose it again. Maybe did you fear that?
Yes, of course. That's why I did my second song like the next day. And it was just, I was trying and trying. I was already playing music all day, every day from the time I was like, 17, 18, 19. And then I kept trying to make a song, trying to make a song. And one day I finished, okay, it's done. It's cool. And I wasn't arguing with myself about it. And I really liked it. And I wanted to show everybody my song. And of course, I hadn't learned how to record yet. So I only knew how to play the songs. And I was playing all my keyboards and singing. And then I wrote another song and another song. And probably by the time I had 10 songs under my belt, then I started really trying to learn how to record so I could layer sounds and do guitars and keyboards at the same time and sing and add special effects, that kind of thing.
And that kind of thing really interested you as well, didn't it? From an early age, how you could put all this together and maybe change it around and get different sounds and so on. And then kind of punk started. What did you make of punk and new wave at that point in terms of what you had been listening to and playing?
It was a liberation. It was a giant liberation. As long as I was comparing myself to Jimmy Page and Rick Wakeman, I really felt a little shy about going on stage. But when the Ramones and the Sex Pistols came by, I said, okay, I'm starting my own band. I'm going to sing. I'm going to play my songs. And I had all this courage because people loved the Ramones in my town. And everybody was talking about the Sex Pistols. And I thought, I can do that. I could come off like that. And so it gave me a lot of courage to get on stage and just do my thing. I credit punk rock for giving me the courage to do that.
And it is amazing. I know lots of people claim to have, been at Sex Pistols' original tour and stuff like that. There's a number of people who've gone on to do amazing things in music that moment was their Elvis Presley moment, if you like, their rock and roll moment, where they heard this and this changed everything for them. And it seemed to do that for you as well, in terms of, you were the leader, you were the keyboardist, you were the writer, the singer, you were pushing forwards with other bands within Seattle at the point. This next track, Judy Collins, and she now has got 55, probably 56 albums of work. In terms of the amount of albums that you've had an influence on or been connected to or produced, or do you keep track of how many albums you're up to at the moment?
I think it's just like a close family. The songs and albums I work on are just like, wow, I'm happy they're there. I really like almost everything I've worked on, especially my own music. And so many people I've produced, I just love their records. And so I don't really count them. I recently wrote a book about some of my production experiences, and I tried to remember as many names of bands that I was in and bands that I recorded. And that was really fun. Just trying to piece it all together and make a list.
And there's a documentary just about to come out as well. Does that cover some of this as well, your life within music?
The documentary is actually about a small window of time I spent in Argentina 2 years ago. And I had my own band and we were touring. And I was also producing an 18-year-old guy named Rocco Posca for Sony down there. So I was in the studio with him and I was rocking out these concerts with my band. And my relationship with Argentina is unbelievable. It's like if I walk down the street in London, nobody's going to come up and say hello to me. If I go in New York, nobody says hello. If I go to Argentina, everybody driving a fruit truck, working at the airport, working at the bars, they all just come to the window and knock and say hello and jump out of their cars with CDs for me to sign. It's completely mental down there. Yeah.
Wow. And it does. The ego must enjoy that as well when that happens, because, like you talk about with the Sky Cries Mary, it was a breakthrough for you at the age of 33, because you were going, right. I'm touring. We're releasing albums. They get played, and so that's an important thing when you were back at the age of 13, 14, looking at Rick Wakeman surrounded by his office instruments, for you to get that in Argentina as well.
Well, I think I joined rock and roll to meet people and to interact with human beings. And so anytime someone wants to interact with me, like your good self, about music, I feel turned on. That is what I came here for. And if people don't know about my music, or I don't have any interaction, it's kind of like, okay, it's a bit of a struggle.
Right. So we're going to take your spoken introduction to Albatross, Judy Collins, and then we'll go straight into the track.
Sounds good.
Albatross by Judy Collins. From the collection Wildflowers. Existential loneliness so real and pretty, you can hold her in your heart. The embroidery of your life holds you in and keeps you out, but you survive. Imprisoned in your bones behind the ice and glass windows of your eyes. Thoughts and feelings drift out to sea, while people parade by like fluttering spirits in a dream.
The lady comes to the gate, dressed in lavender and leather, looking north to the sea. She finds the weather fine. She hears the steeple bells ringing through the orchard all the way from town. She watches seagulls fly, silver on the ocean, stitching through the waves, the edges of the sky. Many people wander up the hills from all around you, making up your memories and thinking they have found you. They cover you with veils of wonder as if you were a bride. Young men holding violets are curious to know if you have cried, and tell you why and ask you why, either way you answer. Lace around the collars of the blouses of the ladies, flowers from a Spanish friend of the family. The embroidery of your life holds you in and keeps you out, but you survive, imprisoned in your bones behind the ice and glass windows of your eyes. And in the night, the iron wheels rolling through the rain, down the hill through the long grass to the sea. And in the dark, the hard bells ringing with pain. Come away alone. Even now by the gate, with your long hair blowing, and the colors of the day that lie along your arms, you must barter your life to make sure you are living. And the crowd that has come, you give them the colors and the bells and the wind and the dream. Will there never be a prince who rides along the sea and the mountains, scattering the sand and the foam into amethyst fountains, riding up the hills from the beach in the long summer grass, holding the sun in his hands and shattering the icing glass. Day and night and day again, and people come and go away forever, while the shining summer sea dances in the glass of your mirror, while you search the waves for love and your visions for a sign. The knot of tears around your throat is crystallizing into your design. And in the night, the iron wheels rolling through the rain, down the hills, through the long grass, to the sea. And in the dark, the heart bells ringing with pain. Come away alone. Come away alone with me.
Wow, another beautiful track. When were you hearing Judy Collins' music? She's from Seattle as well, I think, is she?
I don't know. I thought she was from like Colorado or something, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know exactly where she's from. I don't know too much about her. To be honest, my mom used to play that record in my house when I was growing up. And I didn't like a lot of the music that she played. She tended to like Broadway shows and kind of things like that, Frank Sinatra. But this record, when she played it, it kind of held my attention and created an incredible atmosphere. The string arrangements on that record all the way through are really interesting, kind of like Beatles-esque, really evocative and imaginative. And then her voice just soars like an eagle, way up, way up.
And you talked that when you were listening to the Beatles way back then, you liked what rock music was doing in terms of painting pictures for you as well. And that kind of music, not just the lyrics and the singing, but the music, like you say, the strings can take you to another place as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Very, very, very powerful. You talk about your mum there. Your dad was a musician as well. Is that true?
Yeah, he played jazz. And because of that, I never liked jazz. And he always put me down for my rock and roll. So it was a great family feud in the music department.
Did he feel you were musically talented?
He thought I was wasting my time because he told me that the electric guitar was going to go by the wayside like the accordion. So, and I thought, John McLaughlin and Jimi Hendrix are playing and everything's cool. The electric guitar is here to stay. Now he might have a point. But there's certainly a lot of guitar music between the time he told me that and nowadays. And I'm sure glad I was playing guitar all this time.
Absolutely. Choosing your next track as a jazz track, I know we've got your spoken introduction in a moment as well. Did you then deliberately just keep away from jazz until you got to a point where you thought, right, I need to listen to this?
When Jimi Hendrix died, it was really sad and nobody knew what to do. Like, this was like the guitar pinnacle. And the next year, John McLaughlin came into the spotlight. And suddenly we were able to hear this other guitar player who was going to take guitar into a new stratosphere. And he had this group called Mahavishnu Orchestra that was the loudest electric band with violin and the most intense drummer. And he was the fastest guitar player anyone had ever seen and the craziest. And so I fell in love with John McLaughlin immediately. And this is one of his older albums, a little after his time in Miles Davis. Like, Miles Davis was one of the few people that put like a heavy string bending electric guitarist in his jazz band. And so this is very innovative music we're about to hear.
Extrapolation. I don't often like jazz, and since my dad played loud saxophone, it usually turns me off. But Johnny McLaughlin, I always want to talk about him. In the late 60s and early 70s stuff anyway. He's going out there. He's been electrified by the legacy and profound effect of Hendrix, and he wants fucking respect. So he pushes the boat out and launches his guitar rocket ship to fly faster and higher. Okay?
Extrapolation, John McLaughlin from 1969. Choice of my guest, Gordon Raphael. Gordon, when did you start to produce other people's music? And before that, were you producing your own music? Because you'd written all these songs. Did you then have recording studio experiences where you thought, I know what to do here, rather than somebody else telling me what to do?
Yeah, somewhere around the age of like 22, I recorded my first song. I'd also tried for a number of years to record, but I couldn't get the technique together. I'd either erase my parts if I liked them by accident, and or I would distort the input too much, and I really couldn't get the hang of it. But one day, again, I finished a song, and then I started my second song, and I recorded about 4 songs on the first day that I had success. And sometimes I'd make stuff up and just record it, and then overdub and build songs from improv. And that's that. I continued along those lines for about 10 years. And people started coming to me and saying, "Oh, we heard you know how to record stuff. Will you record my band?" And that's how I got involved with other people. They just kind of word of mouth got around that I was somebody that could do things with 4-track tape recorder or an 8-track tape recorder. And it went from there, really.
Yeah, and just going back slightly in time as well, when you were in high school, studied German, also studying communism. So you were the weird kid, as you described yourself. But at the time, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention Records were the other thing that kind of marked you out as somebody who was different.
Yes. In my group of friends, if you weren't carrying a Frank Zappa album around in high school, you kind of weren't cool.
And this particular album is quite interesting because Zappa or others have talked about it being almost the anti-Beatles Sgt. Pepper. The title alone, "We're Only in It for the Money," part of the No Commercial Potential project, where 2 or 3 albums I think were put together. And I also read something. I know Frank Zappa is a very interesting person, but he made a comment that with that album, that he could re-edit it, if you like, splice it in different places, put it back together, and he said it would still work, in the way he wanted it to work as an album. That kind of experimentation, is that something you feel you can do as a producer, or do you have to kind of take a back seat and go, what is it the artist wants, and what can I bring to it?
Well, when I'm producing my own stuff, I like to experiment all the time. And when I work with other people, I tend to show them some ideas, and sometimes they like them and say, "Oh yeah, that sounds great." Like maybe they'll have a guitar solo that they practiced at home, and I'll say, "Can I use my synthesizer and make a spaceship land in the middle of your guitar solo? Would that be okay?" And they go, "Well, show us what that sounds like." And I'll make a little UFO sound and land it in the middle of the guitar solo, and 50% of the time they go, "Oh, wow, that's so cool. Let's keep it." And the other half of the time they go, "Are you crazy? Get that shit out of my solo."
And I imagine sometimes that leads to difficult conversations with, I don't know, record label executives and so on. I think there was one of those with when they listened to the production of the Strokes album.
Yeah, well, one thing you should know is that executives from record companies do not talk to Gordon Raphael. Like categorically, it's like those conversations never happen. Like musicians call me, and I work with musicians. And one of the few times I ever worked with a record company was with the Strokes, and the record label told me that I was ruining the album, and the way I produced it was just terrible and amateur, and I needed to be fired, of course.
And at the time, I mean, you strike me as a very honest person, because reading the fact that the band was saying to you, "Listen, the record company want Gil Norton to produce it. Are you going to be able to do it better than him?" And you said, "Well, I can't say I will." Is that something that actually happened?
Yeah, it's something that happened because at the time they asked me the question about if I was as good as Gil Norton. I had never sold a record in my life, like 0 records sold. Gordon Raphael. Gil Norton, 5 million copies of every record he'd done since the 80s. I'm sure my ego at that point was normal and kind of healthy, and I wasn't going to claim to be better than some gigantic, amazing, famous record producer.
And now, how would you answer that question, Gordon?
Same way. I got my own tricks, and if you want to work with me, we could do that. And if you want to work with Gil Norton, go ahead. He's a very talented man.
Right, that's where we end part 1 of my chat with Gordon for They Say I Live in the Past. Part 2 is next week on June the 14th, so tune in for that as well and spread the word. Thanks for listening in this evening, and keep safe. See you next week. Good night.